Welcome, everybody. It's the Boots to the Boardroom podcast again. This is Blake Miles joining you today with Andrew Hutton. Good to see you again, Andrew, as always.
I appreciate it, Blake. Glad to be here.
So for those who don't know, the Catalyst program is a veteran transition program with an emphasis on teaching veterans the language of business. And the way we do that is we have cohorts with different schools, and the cohorts are, I like to describe them as an MBA crash course. And we bring in veterans and non-veterans to be our guest instructors. And these veterans have had, or veterans and non-veterans have both had heavy experience in different industries and all the different MBA disciplines. And what they do is they come in and teach these different classes and teach the veterans how to translate what they did in the military into a language that the private sector can both understand and find value in. And so we've had a great success over the years through this, and the way the process works, we've had a lot of good success stories come out of that. And Andrew is one of those success stories, and seeing him go through the cohort, it was our last cohort. That started in July for you, right?
No, I was in the April-May class.
Oh, it's all blurring together for me. All right.
Yeah, it's been two cohorts since I completed the program.
Even better. Well, now I'm making a fool of myself right as we start, so that's always a good sign. But
it's all good.
Yeah.
Life comes at us fast, man.
Yeah, well, and you're going through a blur right now too. I know that with you're on the way out the door of the military, but we'll get into that, and I don't want to steal your thunder before we need to. So with the Catalyst program, we've got partnerships with Indiana Wesleyan University, Southern Methodist University, and we're just now starting our partnership with Notre Dame, and we'll be having a cohort that starts in early 25, springtime 25, we'll call it that. I guess that's still early in 25, but it's not the end. I know that. But anyway,
I think it counts as early. I think it counts as early.
Yeah, we'll call it that. Early, or 3-4 months in, that's still early out of 12. Yeah, my language still applies there. So I first met Andrew in the cohort going through. I think we might have talked on the phone once or twice beforehand.
We did.
Yeah, the part of my role is talking to new candidates before they come into the cohort, and that's something else that all blurs together. But I remember the cohorts pretty well, and I always enjoyed Andrew being in there because he's very engaged, very thoughtful, always has good questions, and good questions bring out a lot of good answers from the instructors, and seeing that back and forth exchange from veterans that have been in a lot of different military situations and have a great amount of experience in the military, both in the conventional side but also the special operations side. It's those types of exchanges are always great to see, because you can see the process of learning coming out of that, learning the language of business, and that's something that I greatly enjoy seeing. And Andrew is definitely one of those candidates that did a very good job of that. So without further ado, Andrew, I'll let you introduce yourself and just kind of tell first what you're doing right now and kind of how you got into the military, if you could.
Yeah, happy to talk about it. It's I don't think it's too amazing of a career, because I know so many people have done so much more. So I came in the Army 2002, later in the year, November actually, because I kind of pissed away my college, poor choices in high school. Thought I knew what I wanted to do, like every teenager, and just kind of like did a lot of couch surfing. I spent my senior year living on few friends' couches while I was trying to graduate. Poor decision on my part. Poor coping skills for stressors that, in the grand scheme of things, not that big of a deal, but they felt the world to me. Joined the Army. It gave me the purpose that I didn't know I needed and helped me become stronger of who I am, which was great. I bounced around from 1st Cav initially to 82nd, and then finally found my way to the Ranger Regiment. Post KD as a squad leader, which was super cool. Eventually got accepted. Took a little bit, but that's the beauty of the organization. Nobody cares where you came from. It's just be a good human being, own your job, and focus on bettering everybody else to accomplish what the nation needs. So I spent half my career there. I was a platoon sergeant, an ops NCO, regimental headquarters first sergeant, and then finished up with the phalanx program. I got to connect with a lot of nonprofits, work with that. Jared Engel is recommended you guys because trying to learn the landscape in my first 90 days, which was a lot. Oh my gosh, there's a lot more to transitioning out of the military than I realized until I got into that position. And he sent me a message, was like, hey, like come join on here, put us in contact. I attended one of the mentor meetings or networking meetings in January of 2024, and I was blown away. It was awesome. I got to sit in on Kevin's class on personal finance and understand that deep dive, and I was like, this is amazing. This is the kind of transition I needed. So talk to you, I talked to Dan, blown away about y'all's passion and everything else. Attended the cohort starting in March, culminating in May with Southern Methodist University. I was still like working on my transition. I was already accepted at that point to Fuqua School of Business at Duke, which was super awesome. And going through the program helped break down a lot of barriers and a lot of assumptions that I had that I didn't realize prepared me drastically for my program requirements so far at Fuqua. It was drinking from a fire hose on some things, especially on the corporate finance, and reading a 10K. And then one of my classmates, who's a CFO, he broke it down, just the accounting measures of assets versus equity and liabilities and stuff, and broke that down really simple. And then it made me like link back up to a lot of the instruction I had it through the cohort, and it was like a dawning moment that like I realized even more. And with no actual financial management experience, I was able to understand generally everything in my financial accounting class, to where it made sense. And going through my managerial accounting, I was like, I didn't realize how impactful and how much I learned in the cohort until I started experiencing in my B school, which was awesome. So it's great. And I made that decision to retire in 2020. Talking with my wife, we're up for being a first sergeant. Didn't know where we were going to be. Got super blessed and super lucky to be the regimental headquarters first sergeant because of the experience. I was essentially ops sergeant major light. Like I had to bring my experiences from the regimental ops to understand that second and third level headquarters requirements, the strategic requirements for the organization, the executive communication, understand the buy-in, and also understand the equities that regimental headquarters brings to influence and set up for success the subordinate organizations up for crisis response and all the things that the Ranger Regiment's super accomplishes on a daily basis. And the fact that I got to understand all of that, huge for my development. Huge. I couldn't have asked for a better transition from the tactical leadership into the strategic level, understanding and everything in between.
Well, it's a very high level description of your path that you've been on, but I think more importantly, from my perspective, hearing those connective tissues of going through the cohort and the pieces of the puzzle that got dumped on the table, and then actually putting them together in the business school, that's really good to hear, because especially in the finance stuff, that's it is drinking from a fire hose in that situation. But I think being able to piece those things together and start to sort through what it all means, once you see the big picture, then everything else becomes
without a doubt,
pretty simple to put together and understand the what and the why behind it. So as you were talking, I'm taking notes over here on on things that interest me.
Sounds good.
When did you get into the Ranger Regiment? What year?
End of 2013.
2013. Okay. So that,
Yep.
how long were you in the conventional forces before you found your way over to Ranger Regiment?
I was just over 10 years.
10 years. Okay.
By that point, I was 2 years complete as a squad leader by the time I showed up.
Gotcha. What attracted you to that pathway?
Well, so I kind of came in with the idea of, because I didn't know a lot about Ranger Regiment, didn't have anybody to like directly mentor me or anything else. Didn't have the privilege of working with anybody from Regiment prior to. It was kind of luck of the draw. Just didn't come with any good understanding of the military when I came in the Army. And so it kind of like did like a drunken stumble into the Ranger Regiment.
Yeah.
I was a little bit of part of it was a little frustrated with my organization in the 82nd. Not saying anything bad against the 82nd. We just had a little bit of poor leadership in certain key areas. I'm not trying to throw anybody under the bus. And I had to, while learning to be a squad leader with not a good handover, we had a cycling out of platoon leadership, trying to make the function both as a squad leader and platoon sergeant with not a strong senior level leadership in the company, trying to figure out how, because we transitioned over to doing reconnaissance at that time, which was a huge nightmare challenge of actually committing to that. I walked in one day and I realized, like, this is what I thought, right? Like, I thought I felt like I knew I was the smartest person in the room, most competent, and which is never good. Never want that, because one, that doesn't keep your edge sharp to be best for your guys, right? Like, that's what you want. And so I kind of was already like, I need to move on. I needed something different. Attended a reconnaissance brief for the reconnaissance company because I didn't think I'd be accepted as a squad leader at all. So I went that route. Thankfully, it didn't work out, which I'm totally grateful for. Went to BCO 375. It's not BCO 375, HHC for reconnaissance for that last training cycle. Joined BCO 375 as a weapons squad leader and kind of progressed through that way. I just didn't know what I didn't know. And so throughout a lot of my career, a lot of people have looked at me and be like, Hutton just figures it out. He'll figure it out. He's smart. So I have not had a very good guiding like force through things. I've had key leaders who like said the things that just like made my brain go into overdrive to figure out the second and third order effects. But I'm a big person. Like, I never know what I don't know, which is why I love the regiment, because it's open communication, hold people accountable. I mean, I had conversations with a lieutenant that I put through our fires officer over in 82nd, and I helped put him through Ranger School because I was like, I didn't care, like, just develop everybody, make everybody better, because that's always been something I cared about. And he was complaining to me about an NCO in his section at the time, and I was like, well, sir, if he's doing these things, how'd you evaluate him? And he told me, and I was like, so you said he's the best of the best, but he's not. You're not holding him accountable. You're not holding the future, like the future junior leaders, the future soldiers that he's going to be responsible for. You're failing them by not holding them accountable.
Yeah. Which
I think in the Ranger Regiment we do better than most. There's always room for improvement. So I kind of did that similar to joining the Army. Like, I found those purposes, found the organization that aligned with my values that I didn't know that I needed. So it was kind of a being in the wrong place at the right time to drive me to be better, which is awesome. And the principles of the Ranger Regiment, like I got there and had not some of the best leadership initially. Found my way to 375 and it worked out way better, which is great. Great things. And got accepted after a little bit of struggles, because steep learning curve anytime you go transition from the conventional Army to any soft organization, right? But it's ask questions, be humble, learn, don't assume you know anything, right? And eventually it's just like you just continue to show performance, and there's always going to be that curve of like we don't know you but once we know you, we accept you, and it's like nothing else, right? My last 6 years in the regiment, nobody knew that I was an import, which is funny, right? I take as a badge of honor, right? Like I'll openly admit it because I'm not gonna lie about that. But that's the thing. Like you work, you perform, you learn, you care about other people, and that will speak for itself. And then your good reputation will start preceding you, and like everyone will know you. And I think that's kind of how most organizations work. It's just different barriers to entry and different levels of that performance, and different values you have to express to get that buy-in, right? Yeah. Just like anywhere, just like at Fuqua, just like going through the Catalyst program, right? Like we didn't know what to expect. And then after the first couple of days, we were like, oh, our cohort bonded really well. I mean, we still talk every now and then and getting up, which was super cool to find out that a couple of the guys are going through business school. Like I talked to Rodney, he's actually going to start going through business school, which is super awesome. Awesome. A lot of the things that we got exposed to through the cohort, like opened a lot of people's eyes to the benefits of how it like expands your brand network, and kind of like certifies you to do more, which I don't think a lot of people would have been as apt to that without experiencing all the instruction from the phenomenal instructors. I can't. And the mentorship and how you guys structured the course to meet our needs was awesome, right? I kind of tangented, I apologize.
No, it's good. That's what this is for.
Yeah, but like I've gotten lucky, right? Like I didn't know about the Catalyst program. I didn't know about business school. I didn't know about Ranger Regiment. Somebody was like, hey man, this is a thing. And I was like, oh, that's really awesome, right? Like I was like, coming into Ranger Regiment, I was like, oh, they'll just never accept me as a squad leader. And everybody was like, dude, like you'd be perfect as a squad leader. Just go be a squad leader. I was like, oh, okay. And I'm like, all right, this is really awesome. If somebody would have told me that a couple of years ago, I would have just done it sooner.
Yeah.
But it also gives me a unique perspective on everything, because I come in very wide-eyed and very openly honest and integral, but I'm also somebody who will always question the why about what we do. So it's never the thing I always hated is like, we've always done this. It's like, man, right? I talk to young Rangers now and they're like, oh, we've always done this. So it's like, I remember when this started. I remember that this wasn't a thing. No, we haven't always done this. You've always done this, but the organization hasn't. So when you say the we, like you have to be specific, right? Like in my memory or in my tenure, because words have meaning and there's an understanding of that. And I got to experience what we're experiencing now. Now there's no known fight. The GWAT's over for the most part, right? Like out of Afghanistan, mostly out of other places, not trying to talk about things, right? But I witnessed that in the regular Army. I got to experience that drawdown and stuff. I got to experience at one point we lost some fellow Rangers, not in my company, but in our battalion. And there was nobody in my platoon dealt with that before because their time was so young. So like that memory of the different things, the different ups and downs has given me, and be able to ask the why and experience that has given me a pretty good perspective to look at things from a bigger box to kind of like translate and do some things. It's been awesome. It's been great. And like going to business school, right? One of my mentors from when I was a squad leader was like, dude, just do this. And I was like, I didn't even think it was a thing. I didn't think I'd be able to be cool enough, right? Just like Ranger Regiment, just like anything else. Just like Jared saying, hey, like you should go check this out. And I was like, dude, this is perfect. Kind of thing, talking with you and Dan and Renee. So that's been the tenure of my career. It's just like doing those things, like having a conversation with Dan about corporate strategy and stuff like that. And I was like, I didn't know that was a thing. That's perfect. Yeah. Which is why like setting me on my path for when everyone's like, hey man, what do you want to do when you graduate? Now I have a path because I just didn't know. So it's been pretty awesome, but that's how I got to the Ranger Regiment. Just didn't know what I didn't know and did the drunken stumble to be ready to move on and do a change, and then found the place that was home.
What was your rank when you decided to jump over to Ranger Regiment?
I was a squad leader.
Squad leader.
Yeah, I was a KD complete squad leader. I promoted to sergeant first class in 2015. I hit I was promotable. We like our list was like super long, so we didn't promote till I think June of 2016, and then came back from a really frustrating deployment. I about that, and then went through RASP in September and took a platoon that month.
So, full disclosure, I never went to Ranger school. I've talked to enough guys to have a pretty good understanding of Ranger school, at least, in as much as you can understand without actually going through it. But going through at that rank, I can only assume that you had some additional burdens put on your shoulder pretty regularly.
So I went through Ranger school in 2010. I went through Ranger school as a team leader. Just so that really wasn't a thing that was emphasized big in first cav. And I got to 82nd, got through some things, like working through some stuff, and I was supposed to go early 2010, but then we got blown out to Haiti, so I had to do that. And then once that whole ordeal got redeployed and stuff like that, and then got everything situated and went through in September, graduated in December.
Okay.
Yep.
So, all right. So you had some time back at 82nd before going back to okay.
Yep. And then I went through RASP in 2013 and then showed up December of 2013.
Gotcha. So, and I'm assuming that because of the amount of experience that you've gathered over all those deployments at 82nd, the Army bureaucracy component of everything shifting over to Ranger Regiment made it a bit easier, but there's still that that learning curve. But it sounds like you've got the right mentality to pick up the pieces of what's needed and how to get there.
Yeah, I believe so. It's just to build everything about learning is just building permanence, right? So you get one of my former bosses and mentors who's big into shooting. He broke it down like a mag change, right? Like once you learn how to do a mag change a certain way, like 200 times, you build that permanence for doing it that way 200 times. But if you need to learn it to be a new way or a more effective way or higher level of performance way, you're gonna have to do it 200 times the new way to unlearn that, and then 200 more times to learn it the different way to be as proficient doing the different way as you did the previous way. And it's an easy math equation to make it simple. It takes twice the amount of effort over time to learn a new thing or learn something in a new way. So I had to, in a shorter period of time, learn some things at different levels, right, to build that permanence. But I never treated it that I was doing a new thing. I've had to deal with that through most of my life. So thankfully I have that, and I'm definitely, my dedication to like put the effort to learn and study and learn things after hours and stuff has always been there, which is good.
That's great.
So yeah, it most definitely helped.
So
it didn't hurt, at least.
Yeah, I can imagine. And you mentioned the Phalanx program. If you could kind of explain that a bit, I think that would be useful.
Yeah, most definitely. So the Phalanx program, I was at the regimental ops when it first stood up by my mentor, Ray Perez, who kind of set me on the path for business school, was kind of the catalyst for it to bring back the throw out for the name of the program, right?
I can say that word comes up in pun intended or even pun not intended quite often in these podcasts. Yeah. So it's fun.
Yeah, it's a great name for the program. So it definitely works. It's one of my more used and appreciated words. So around that time, we realized that the GWAT was starting to die down and everything else. And we realized a lot of Rangers were getting out with their medical records not squared away. Because, I don't have medical records prior to 2013.
Yeah.
Which I found that out during my VA appointments. Blows my mind, right? All these things, like there's no record of me having a refractive eye surgery from 2005. No record of it at all. Didn't realize that. There's no record at all. Life-changing surgery, so I don't, for 17 years, didn't have to wear glasses, which is great. Or however long, 19 years now? Wherever 2005 to 2024, right?
They just misplaced the thumb drive. It happens.
I guess, right? So, and I'm not the worst, right? And so we realized that. We also realized that there was a bunch of enlisted don't don't go to get education. There's a whole stigma against it. I mean, I fell victim to it, right? Not that I didn't push my guys to do it. I just didn't think I needed it because it was like, why bother, right?
Yeah.
And so the phalanx program got formed out of that, and started working through there. Thankfully, we also have the regiment developed a partnership with the Three Rangers Foundation to work transition assistance counseling through former NCOs and officers, and building a network for Ranger mentors to kind of do that, which I know you've met Will, talked to him about that. I've recommended a couple of Rangers to try to get in line with you guys and stuff, and trying to find the right fit to help Rangers have a successful transition. That's what it was started as. And it kind of had a couple ups and downs because everything in the military, as you know, is based on command emphasis and is more personality driven versus process driven. That's just the nature of it. You'll have a set structure of things that kind of goes through, but it ebbs and flows. And so I stepped in August of 24, and it was one of those things where it was like, oh, well, I would do this if I was in charge of it. We all have those conversations in the shop, right? And by luck, we had to figure out what I would do, because I was a free master sergeant after being the regimental headquarters first sergeant, dealt with some medical situations that made continued service a little challenging, to speak, right? And so my boss at the time, Kevin Comiskey, was like, first sergeant, you should go do this. I was like, no, they're not going to do that. Whatever, right? One of the things. And then afterwards, I talked to Brett Johnson, the regimental sergeant major at the time. He was like, we're going to give you a first right of refusal. And I was like, I get to go do this and go invest in Rangers to figure out how to make Rangers more successful. Because my whole thought on retirement comes down to an instance. It was after my first deployment in first cav, came back, and one of the squad leaders got out on block leave or whatever. And I saw him at the gate, and I was like borderline scared of this guy anyways. And he was at the gate, and I was like, Sergeant, what are you doing at the gate? And this was back when the Army started transitioning to civilian gate guards, right? It was like, no, it's, I forget his first name. I don't want to say it because I'm going to screw it up and not trying to throw any misrepresentation, right? But he was Hispanic. But he was like, no, just call me by my first name. I was like, that's super, like, and I'm driving through, I'm like, oh my God, I'm gonna die, right? And it was like, I had nothing better to do, so I just figured I would do this. And I was like, that sounds horrible. There's nobody should get out of the Army with that. Like, you're talking about defending the greatest country in the universe. It's a challenging job. There's no military from bottom to top that performs as well consistently through we do. And I know we kind of laugh and we have jokes once we're in the service behind the curtain, right? But we don't realize until you work with another nation or another organization truly how starkly wide that gap is. You really don't. I've had the privilege of getting to do so in moments, and a lot of guys I've served with or like had touch points with throughout my career explained to me a lot of those differences. And it's like, and I think I'm decent at understanding connecting the dots, like beyond myself and beyond my experiences, just by intentionally listening to the experience of others, and seeing it in Iraq and Afghanistan, and a couple other places. It's a huge gap. You blow your mind. We talk, like, when soldiers talk about, oh, like, this is a thing, we're like listening to Rangers talk about, oh, this is blah, blah, blah. It's like, man, like, you don't know the other side of the coin. And it's a huge gap every level up you go. So there's no reason for that to happen. So it's been one of the things where I've told everybody I've served as a leader was, man, I don't care what you want to do. Just do your time honorably. Get out with a plan so that way you never have to come back in. Because I've had friends get out and struggle to find purpose and be like, oh, I'll just come back in. But we forget that the military doesn't stop. The machine never stops, right? So I've served with guys who got out and their former peer group are first sergeants when they come back in as team leaders, sergeant majors, like all kinds of stuff. And you're like, man, the machine never stops. So, and most of those people tend not to continue to serve. Some do, right? I've had one of my former first sergeants, Canadian American, got out and came back in. and he's a sergeant major now, looking at retirement. But his peer group was already out of the Army, but is already out of the Army by now. And he had extenuating circumstances. Phenomenal story, phenomenal leader and human being. But that's not the norm, right? Like that's just that's above the 99th percentile, right? Everybody else tends to struggle with that. So it's one of those things of understanding what that looks like and what that is. But through that whole process, my goal was like, hey, do all that service and get out with a plan so you don't have to come back in. And the goal for everybody, regardless of what job you hold, what your career is, what your life is, you want to thrive. That's what you want for everybody. If we put a little bit of that emphasis towards guys like and women, right? We make them more successful. And if you want to have that free marketing, like Brad talked about in marketing class, like when you're talking about influencers, like talking about the message and talking about that's free marketing. So if you want to better market the military, you invest in your people, they transition out successfully, and everyone's like, hey, Brad, like, why are you good? Hey, Blaine, why are you good? Blake, why are you good? Tom, why are you good? Angela, Andrew, whatever, whoever you are, why are you so awesome and successful? Oh, well, it's because I started in the military. I was invested in. I got my degree. I was pushed better. I had good leadership. I just needed something new. Not, well, I got out because my leadership sucked, or I got out because I had no purpose, or I got out because I was failed, or stuff like that. And knowledge management is the hardest thing in the military, because once we offboard, there's nothing. We don't like come back and like there's not a knowledge. We don't tell the TAPS program of like, hey, by the way, this is what I did and this is super successful. This is how you should learn. There's no feedback loop, and if there's no feedback loop, you can't make something better. So like talking to my guys, like that was the thing that not the thing, but that was one of the things that I cared about. Even when I was a squad leader, platoon sergeant, first sergeant, I was like, I don't care what you want to do. We'll figure it out, make you better, because that's the right thing to do. It just has all these other benefits of it. So jumping into the phalanx program, we kind of needed a little bit of a pivot to be more effective. And we talked about not necessarily rebranding, but restructuring how we're going to look at it, and talked to a bunch of alumni that were there. Ray, Mike Albaugh, who was the SAR major at the time, Adam Armstrong, now former 275 commander. He was kind of like the officer in charge of like the catalyst process for that, and doing like the thinking of what to do, and talked to a bunch of people with that and my own experiences, and Yuma Barnett, who was the first full-time phalanx NCO. So taking those lessons learned, and like we had at the time I was coming in, we had this kind of survey to figure out what everyone thought about the phalanx. We kind of figured out that nobody knew what the process was, because nobody was really talking about it, because it wasn't consistent, and had to build that consistency. For a lot of the things I wanted to do, because I tend to kind of get a little bit big brain, but that's why I'm labeled as the strategist for my personality assessment that I found out, which was a very perfect assessment of me. Yeah, it's great, and I love personality assessments. I love being accountable for things, but and self-measurables, right? Because if you're not measuring your performance against a set metric for success, you can't evaluate. You can't confirm the return of your investment of time and money. And if it's not worth the time and effort or of resources, right? Like then you're wasting things, because then you're not being effective. And what we figured out was the marketing, the branding, and kind of like the mission statement to be that foundation. So myself and the executive leadership of the Ranger Regiment kind of refocused that for education, which was already going really well, kind of renormalizing a lot of the health approaches that we were going to, and the professional development going through there, and then coupled with the transition of transitioning Rangers out successfully. And what we found was the model that I kind of thought about as a leader throughout my whole career is, if you build somebody to be better from day one throughout their whole tenure in your organization, when they leave, they're just a better product. They're better. If they're a better product, they're more successful. So if you started the Ranger Private and build all the way out to where by the time they are the regimental sergeant major, They already have a plan. They already know how to offboard. They already have those connections. They have those skills, and they have knowledge of all the various transition programs to go work through, so way they can have a successful transition. And when somebody says, hey, former sergeant major, why are you so freaking awesome? It's like, well, here's why, and here's the product. And so that's kind of like what we regrounded in, working on getting more throughput of communication, that more embedded communication for the 3 Rangers program, the transition counselors, and build all that. And I think there's a lack of understanding for the benefit for short-term, like, investment of resources for that longer term gain. Yeah. If you think quarter to quarter, year to year, you're probably not going to be successful.
Yeah. Well,
I
was just going to say, so something I kind of ran into working with the Green Beret Foundation, and this is late 2014. The idea back then for a transition program started to solidify, and they wanted to build something. And so that's external of the military. It's not internal of the military. So it's a bit different. However, I think what I kind of saw, and this question, don't let yourself get in trouble with this one, but it's just an observation that I had kind of presented to me as, have you considered that the military doesn't have there's not a good value proposition for them to creating an environment where members within a military organization start to think to themselves, well, I can do something on the outside and enjoy that as well. And creating basically, it doesn't benefit the military for their people to start thinking that, well, I can be successful outside of the military just for the same reasons that I'm successful in the military. And it was always something that it never crossed my mind, because it's almost dark to think about, but it's a dollars and cents reality ultimately. But what, I guess I'll caveat that with what I'm seeing now from the military, like the Phalanx program is a perfect example of that. Is what you just said, is if you're getting your people better from the very beginning, a very early age, you're making better soldiers while they're in, and then once they get out, the opportunities are that much more expanded because they've done all this upfront work. It benefits the military, it benefits the soldiers while they're in, and it ultimately benefits the country, because the military is actually churning out leadership, and people are getting out of the military with opportunities because they're just better, well-rounded individuals in a bunch of different areas that they're interested in.
Yeah, I've got a lot of thoughts on that. It's a challenging problem set. So I actually do disagree with the thought process that there's no benefit for the military. I think there 100% is. Yeah. The problem is I've said this in a lot of different forums. I think the global war on terror ruined the Army, ruined the military industry. One, because we put a lot of money for things just to put money at things. So we lost the value proposition for what we're doing. Two, it became so consistent and repeatable that that ruined that scope of thinking for ourselves as an organization, and then put a sense of not failing as a measurable for success for a lot of our leaders. So now it becomes minimize risk, because, and coupled with the fact that we're more interconnected now than we ever were, minimize that risk, check the block, but do better than everybody else, my predecessor, because if not, I'm not going to be successful. And that when you play to not lose, you don't win. Yeah, it's measurable in sports all the time. If you don't take risks, like intentional calculated risks, right? Don't be careless, right? Don't make obviously poor decisions, right? Don't be like, just hand the other team the ball, right? But if you don't take those risks,
we can't have any missed plays if we just give them the ball. There's no problem. Yeah,
exactly, right. And you're gonna accept failure.
Yep.
Because if you don't accept for failure, you don't encourage growth and development. So there's that. So we definitely did that. And then on top of it, we set this process where it's like it's individual leaders, right? It's how do you standardize leadership when everybody's got different values, different emphasis? One first sergeant or one squad leader or one platoon sergeant, commander, or whoever is going to have one view, and the next guy's not going to be the same. It's just the nature of it, right? We all deal with it, and the military deals with the process that is forced succession. You can't be a squad leader forever. Otherwise, we never have platoon sergeants. Nobody would want to do that, right? Because granted, being a platoon sergeant was probably my most rewarding job in the Army. It was jumping up from being a squad leader. That return of investment isn't as immediate as it was being a squad leader because it's less fun, right? And none of us in the military, especially on the enlisted side, want to grow up. We don't. We're just responsible kids. So there's that. And then anytime, and I had this conversation with somebody last week, the problem that you run into when you're talking about workforce investment and investing in your workforce, the realized gains aren't short term, so they're harder to conceptualize. They're 2, 3, 5 years down the road or longer. So if you can't think past that, which is not something that's easy for us to do as individuals, even as a species, we don't do that very well, especially in America. We are very much not long-term thinking about things.
Quarters and fiscal years, yeah.
Yep, without a doubt, right? And I was talking to somebody about riggers earlier this year. I said, for any airborne unit, right? That and your cooks are your two most like hardest jobs, workplace investment of like just performance, right? Because there's a difference. There's like you can spend 10,000 hours to master something, but you're never going to master it because your brain's never going to learn the new process or the new skill or performance if you don't have a positive affirmation of success. If your brain doesn't realize that it's like you're getting positive responses, you're not going to learn anything, right? And you're not going to learn curb behavior if there's no consequences for poor behavior and as well, right? Because that's how you learn stuff. You learn to not cross the road because your parent just spanked the crap out of you when you were 5. Was like, don't do it. You don't know why. You're like, oh nope. And at a certain point, look back, look both ways because you realize that car is way bigger than you. When you're 2 and 3, you just don't because the world's not big enough. But you kind of build that behavior, and then as you're going through, your parents walking with you and looking both ways. Oh, I'm being like mom and dad. That's a positive response, and then it goes and goes and goes forward and build on that. But you don't realize that as a kid because you're not as conceptually understanding of the world. And I think we kind of lose that into adulthood because we realize we're conceptually understood, but everything we put different emphasis, different priorities. And since we're more aware, you can be too smart. You can be so smart that you're not smart.
Yep.
Right. So those are definite challenges that we come with. So back to the workforce investment, I think that's part of the problem. That's why the Army has struggled with some of its recruiting and onboarding because of that, because it's changing the message and trying to do all these things. But I'm a huge Jim Collins fan. Like, own your hedgehog concept, know what you're good at, and maximize that of your values of what you want to bring in and what you want to do, or also known as your value proposition statement. And know that you don't have to be great at everything, but if you want to be successful, you have to know what you're good at and be successful at that.
Yeah.
And once you establish that success, you can kind of shore up your weaknesses. But if you're negating the things that make you successful without a clear pivot, you're probably going to have a lot of challenges with that. So if you build a better soldier, which also the challenge is good servant quality leadership is exhausting. It's not easy, especially in the military, which is why we have that forced succession, because you grind for 1 to 3 years and it's rough, right? It's rough. It's challenging. My wife and I had these conversations after I was done being a first sergeant, because I was like, oh, I love the job. I just keep going. I could have done that for another year. And she looked at me very pointedly and said, well, I could not. And it's totally understandable, right? because it's a very rewarding job, amazing, probably my favorite job in the Army, given the fact, like even the nature of the company I was responsible for. I mean, at one point we had over almost 330 civilians, contractors, and active duty like Rangers, right? Across multiple branches of service. That's a lot to be responsible for. That's a lot.
Yeah, a lot of
Oh man. And obviously like there's subordinate management and leadership and stuff like that, but you're still responsible.
Yeah.
On and off duty. So it never stops. And that's a grind. You're thinking of a job that a civilian does in 5 years, the military forces it in two or less, because of the nature of that. So it's a hard push. So that's why we have to cycle that out. And you have to, if you're cycling people out, and the job is not easy, and it's just like pro sports, like your average NFL career is 3.5 years. Your average term of service, I think, is like 4.5 years in the across like the Army, right? A little less so for your combat arms. I might be a little off. I think it might be like closer to 5.5 across the whole Army. But your combat arms, because the job is not easy. You get banged up. You do a lot. I mean, that's part of the reason why when we were talking about my the things physically that
medical fun. Yep.
Yeah, a lot of medical fun. Which thankfully, like I already decided to transition out of the Army before I knew all of that. Just made that decision, accepting the decision a little easier once I dealt with the emotional response for things. But it's that long-term thing that's really hard to conceptualize. So if you can communicate the impact and the why and the causal effects of that, it's easier to buy in, but it also requires a very distinct culture shift of not failing, of taking risks and everything else. And there are some people that believe, oh, well, like they can just re-enlist, they should just stay in because it's Army or bust, or it's the job or bust.
Yeah.
And anytime that you put that as a factor, if you're just finding factor to support somebody, you're going to lose that buy-in.
Yeah.
Because there's a difference of I'm doing just enough to not get fired versus I'm thriving, succeeding, and performing, right? So what do you want? Do you want to put a no effort or minimal effort and get minimal effort out of your workforce, or do you want to put more effort but get even greater returns? Because if everybody's performing that way, then in the long term you have less work to do. When I took over the RHHC first sergeant job, we were coming out of COVID, reestablishing a lot of cultural norms, and it was a grind.
Yeah.
It was a grind. And some of the things that I went back on Monday to talk to some of my guys because they're about the PCS and stuff, and still care about the guys I served with. And they were telling me about things like, oh man, like this is really cool. We got these things across the goal line that I put a lot of effort in, and my successor is able to do it so much easier and take it to newer lights, which is great. But that was the thing I was trying to start and catalyze. Like, where do I want the second and third first sergeant after me, so that 4 to 6 years after me, to build that? But if you're not thinking about that, you might not see those results. You might not, and you have to accept that. But I've always thought that the measure of a good leader comes in two things: somebody who doesn't have to use their rank or position to motivate others to accomplish tasks. And two, the measure of success of a leader isn't how successful an organization or subordinates or peers or anybody is during their time in leadership. It's how successful everybody is afterwards. And those things have been very paramount with who I am as a person. And that's what the Army kind of loses, that understanding. Service members don't care about awards, about ceremonies, or anything else. Like, we don't, like, I didn't even want to be, I hate promotion ceremonies for me. I'll do them for everybody else, but I don't want to be awarded or recognized. I just want to do my job and have that investment, knowing that I'm putting the best effort for those I serve with. And that's pretty paramount for all of us. I know you felt it.
Yeah.
You just rather just get a paycheck and just keep going, right? But we don't need that. Like, service members don't. They want the quality of life. They don't want to have to sit there and just hurry up and wait, or just wait to be released when they're not doing anything. Service members don't care. No soldier cares about, oh, well, I got to work hard if it's worth their time. if they get impact, if it's good, realistic training, or they understand the why, even more so now, because when I was a private, it was just like, do your job so you don't, your life's less miserable, right?
Yeah.
Right? We have to, in leadership now, in the world and in the Army, most especially, way harder than what it was when I was a teenager or a young adult. So you have to explain that why more, and we're not doing that. So that causes that disenfranchisation, that lack of motivation, that lack of understanding of the why and the consequences. So like those are the things. I was like, hey guys, this is gonna be hard. Like, hey, like this is why I'm doing this. And I did that a lot, and eventually just chipping away at that ice block, that block of ice, and then it turns into like after hours and hours of work or months or years or whatever, you have like a beautiful sculpture.
Yeah.
It just takes one chip at a time. And to understand that it's just not easy because it's uncomfortable, it's challenging, and you might not see those results. You just have to accept that. And if we as the military defense industry did that and reinvested, hey, is what we're doing worth it? Are we maximizing effort? Are the purchases that we're making, the investments in technology, is it truly worth it, or are we just grasping at straws?
Yeah.
And that's an uncomfortable thing because you also have to admit that you're wrong.
Yeah. And up until this conversation, I don't really think I took into account that short time frame thinking about the problem set. And the way you present it, it makes a lot more sense from an organizational level, not just how to actually execute or implement and execute it, but also how to sell the concept, because it's one of those, the ice cube analogy works really well, because it's not only you that's chipping away at it. You got this vision in your head of what it's going to look like at the end. You're not going to be able to chip away at it. Someone else is going to have to step in at some point and add their flair to it. And ultimately what comes out of it is a functioning process that actually accomplishes the goal. And that's good for me too, because it's like, I know for a while there was probably a bit of frustration about the way the system worked on that end. And I think that piece of the puzzle about leadership thinking about, a quarter at a time or a fiscal year at a time, or just to the end of their tenure, it's not so much of a big picture problem as it is a bunch of smaller scale perceptions about, how much time do I have left to accomplish this task that I want to get done. So I think that's good to hear for me, but I think it's also important from a standpoint of just how the military at large is looking at transition for the people that are getting out, and what that's going to look like and how to make it most effective. And it seems to me that the culture around that concept has been changing, especially in the special operations realm, now that creating offices in a unit that are staffed specifically with the focus being solely on helping their people transition out of the military.
Yeah, it's getting better. I think the problem that we run into is the value of investing that money and time. The problem that we run into is it'll take 2 to 5 years to see fruition for efforts. And what most of us in the special operations for the active duty, they're usually on the way out. Like I had a year of time to give to the program. You need somebody that's there for some greater longevity and to have that consistency, in addition to having somebody who's on that duty side to be the champion and know the language and be that face of the organization. USASOC has at the USASOC level, there's not down at the subordinate units. And then there's also the challenge that you have to do, and this is the hard part for a lot of people. We are tribal. Our species is like we are.
Yeah.
We like what we know. We protect what we know. We take care of it. I mean, I am not as bad as other people, but I mean, I still fall to it, right? I will, I think on my way out, I said this multiple times. I have a consulting fee of $0 an hour for the Ranger Regiment because that's right. Like that's my home. It helped me grow into a better man, a better husband and father, a better person. Right. Was the values that I, I, I thought I would have when I joined the Army. Right. Like that's the easiest way to explain Ranger Regiments. What you think of when you join the Army, you're like, oh, we're going to do these cool things and have people that care and invested. Right. And we kind of stumbled away to get better because we're always doing that. And Tyler Fillion, he was the previous RST, regimental selection and training company first sergeant. And this quote from him, I say is awesome and testament about the Ranger Regiment. Is from day one, you have somebody who's invested in your success because we're gonna onboard you, develop you, and we're charging our leaders to develop you throughout to be better at your job.
Yeah.
The problem is you've got things, right? Doing college means that you have less time to study for tactical requirements and stuff like that. It's the balance of it. So when you look at it, you got to look at what's the value proposition of what we're trying to achieve and the return on the investment. Sometimes it's okay to not go super hard and balls to the walls to maximize everything tactically. You're burning guys out and not allowing them to develop professionally and through education and be set for success. To also be able to think with a bigger box. I hate that think outside of the box comment because what it implies, because I'm a huge fan of words have meaning, right? If you think if it's conceptually outside of a box, then you can't think of it. But if you just expand your box or think with a bigger box, it becomes easier to understand. That's why I don't like the word hard. Hard encompasses like things that are hard, or like this wall. I mean, like obviously it's drywall, but you know what I mean, like a wall impenetrable, and stuff like that. But if it's challenging, it's overcomable because you can overcome a challenge. It's mutable. So there's that. Like that definitely is a thing. And so what happens is we tend to be like, I got to protect mine, or think about mine, or my equities, or my tribe's equities, and it causes polarization. Like the nation's dealing with it right now. There's a lot of it. It's like, oh no, like we got a hard line on this thing instead of is what we're doing for the next 10, 15, or what we should think of for the country, the next 50 years, where we want to be collectively to make everything better for everybody. Not the best for one group, but better for everybody, which means we're like maybe an 80% success for everybody. And so the problem that we deal with is when you have so many lines of effort at the same time, you can't multitask 100% of the time. You just can't. You can do, if you have 100% effort in any given day to do everything, like what you're going to do is you're going to take 20% here, 30% here, 10% here, and so forth. Then it gets to 100% because I love the Ranger Creed, right? But you can't do 100% and then some because there's nothing past 100%. Granted, the way I look at that statement in that portion of the creed is if you can push somebody to like their true like capacity and limits, what they think is 100% really isn't. You can do more, and that's one of the things you kind of experience and understand in Ranger School is, and just like through the Q course and SFAS, when you do things that are challenging, that push you to your limits and harder, you push yourself closer to your limits. You expand your boundaries of performance. Great book, The Talent Code. The author talks about how people learn, and it's just like periodization. Like you go through a steady state of maintaining, slowly increasing your bar of performance, and you push yourself really hard and spike, and then slow back down. And what you realize is when you come back down to your baseline is significantly higher than what it was before the intensive training. You periodically do that, and you increase your baseline. And that's what we do in the special operations community. The problem is you got to look at what are you trying to do, right? And if you want to retain talent, you have to show you're invested in. I truly don't believe that anybody quits a job. Nobody does. You quit or stay for bosses, your culture, which is like the values of the organization, your peer group, how you feel in your workplace, whether you're invested in by your workplace or whatnot, and then expectations. And that expectation is the hardest thing to control or affect, because there's a lot of things that go into it. If you get hired for a job and you have expectations of that job and it doesn't meet those expectations that was promised to you, you're probably less motivated to stay in that job. And you see a job that's like, oh, I think I want to do that instead. Sergeant Major retired Mike Hall made this comment a while back, and I truly believe it. In the military, you're always gonna have people that are gonna stay anyways. You're always gonna have that. You're always gonna have people that get out. Like, no matter what, somebody's gonna be like, I'm just doing 4 years, or I'm just doing my term. I mean, I was that guy. I was that guy that was like, within my first year, I was like, I'm done with this. And obviously 21 years later, I'm finally like saying I'm done, right? But that's what happens when you have people that invest in you. I switched leadership after my first year and was like, oh, this is what a squad leader is supposed to treat you. This is awesome. Oh, I'm getting developed. I'm invested in. Sure, I'll just stay in and stuff like that. And had periods where I had leaders that was like, dude, like, this is what you're going to do, and like invest in me. It was like, oh, I can just keep going. And it makes it easy to say yes. And so eventually I became that person that was on the fence, because I had like, oh, do I re-enlist? Do I get out? And all this stuff. And I also didn't really know what I wanted to do as an adult, because I didn't want to grow up. So that helped out a little bit. Got married, had kids, all that stuff. So it was like more incentives, and the Army makes it easier to stay in, or the military as a whole makes it easier to stay in once you have a family. Most of the time, because the benefits are really good. But if you don't have that investment of leadership and stuff like that, and that sense of purpose, you're not going to keep going. And to go back to the quote to Sergeant Major Hall, is you'll have the people that are on the fence.
Yeah.
And I hit that point. I was on the fence, and then I came to Ranger Regiment. I was like, oh, I'm just going to stay because this is great. I'm going to fight to stay and everything else, because like I had the investment, the culture I wanted, my expectations were closer to being met for the perfect job at the time. And stuff like that. And at one point, I didn't want to be a platoon sergeant or first sergeant ever. And look at me, like I ended up going into those jobs, and I could have said no. That's the benefit of the Ranger Regiment. Like any special operations, you can always quit. Granted, I'm not a quitter, so it made that really hard to do. But those are jobs I was super passionate about, loved. Like even the jobs being an ops NCO, where everyone was like, "Dude, that job is miserable." I worked my butt off, but I had impact. I had return of my investment. I could shape. And I got to mentor and revitalize and do things of like build that longer term strategy. Because it was like, well, how do I want the battalion to be in the next 5 years? I'm only going to be there for a year, which is what it was. But how should the battalion run in 5 years?
And that just got me thinking of something too. Is going back to the investing in your people, kind of what you were talking about with an understanding of your personality. If someone doesn't have a good understanding of what they find value in, what really motivates them, or what their desires are in either personally or professionally, getting them to the point where they have a good understanding, if they're on the fence of like, well, if I go do this, I'll enjoy it more. Like you're missing out on a lot of opportunity for success internally and for them. And that
without doubt.
That makes a lot of sense. So, all right, I think there's a couple of things that you mentioned that I kind of wanted to touch on.
Yeah, please bring me back to center, because I can hand it like nobody else.
I was letting you roll with it because you're in a groove, and that's good.
Yeah,
I think this is going to be a very good podcast for people that are working in different transition units, or looking at like how do we help prepare our people for this transition out, or even how do we help our shop that's working on these transition issues think about this stuff. I think there's some gems in here that you created. So I'm
glad. It's the transition is a challenge. I can go on for a couple of days on that one.
I'm glad I let you run with it.
Yeah.
So you mentioned before you got into the business school, or were considering the business school, you said there were some assumptions that you had, or other people that you talked to had, about what the value of going through business school was or wasn't. And I was wondering if you could dive into that, like before you went in and now that you've been going through it, some of those variances that you've noticed?
So a lot of it comes down to knowledge, right? When you're talking about education, especially on it, right? Coming from the enlisted side, I was like, I'll just never graduate from college because I just didn't think I was good enough. I screwed it up when I was a child, right? And I was like, I just want to have fun. I don't think it's possible, even though I could have graduated years ago, right? Because it comes into like, do you believe it to be possible? I mean, if you think about in the 80s, the 4 minute mile was, I think it was 4 minute mile, right? 4 minute mile was never like to be broken. And then 180 people in less than 6 months like broke it once we realized it was possible. So I think what it gets to most of us, especially on the enlisted side, the commissioned officers have a better understanding because they go through college. They've already gone through that process like in person, so it's more understandable. And that network that they have from all their other friends that were in college, right? Like even the military institutions, not everybody stays in because the job's not easy, right? So people get out and you're like, you have those connections to tell you, oh, well, I did this. We don't necessarily have that on the enlisted side, just because of the nature of our job and our requirements and where we come from. So I just never thought it was a possibility until somebody sat me down and talked to me for a 3-hour conversation with Ray Perez. He's a Gazetta Business School, Gazetta School of Business out of Emory alum. And he was like, dude, talk to me for 3 hours. I think I spoke for maybe 15 minutes of it, which is impressive because obviously I'm not talking. And that changed my life. It did. Because he was an intentional leader that was just like, dude, you're worth investing in because we are. And like, I'm going to explain it to you and show you that it is possible and show that you are possible. And here's why and understanding of that. It's like going to Ranger School. Like everybody thinks Ranger School is like this ultimate thing. It's not. It's not hard. It's not easy because if it was easy, everybody would do it, right? But once you go through, you're like, oh, it normalizes things. And that's why. And once you normalize performance and expectations, it now becomes easier because your brain doesn't have this fear of the unknown. Because that's how we survive. That's our fear. We're not afraid of something. We're afraid of what we think might happen if this occurs.
Yeah.
We're not actually afraid because we don't know how that works. We don't know what's going to happen. Our negativity bias just kicks in because our brain's there to keep us alive. So we do that. So we have these fears of performance and everything else. And a lot of us that are higher performing individuals, we have imposter syndrome. Because if you're high performing, you're probably going to be around other high performing individuals. And you look to your left and right, you're like, dude, these guys are amazing. I can't believe it. Like, right? And talk to people about it. And that's one of the things coming out of that conversation and going through the application process. I mean, I'll say this. I dealt with a whole bunch of anxiety. It was self-induced. And I had a bunch of MBA graduates that were like, dude, like you are stressing way too much. Like, oh God, like I put things on a pedestal. And I started going through the process, and I was talking with some friends prior to, because I was planning on going to Emory. But like that was the only school I was looking at. I was just like, I'll just go there because I don't think I'm good enough for anything else going through like the whole process. Just like talking with Ray, I just didn't think it was a thing. I was just going to settle. And not saying that that's wrong, and not saying that doing certain avenues I was thinking about at the time are wrong, but this is a better fit. I just didn't know it was because I didn't consider that possibility.
Yeah.
Because I didn't normalize that possibility as being a possibility or a pathway. And that's the challenge that comes into it is kind of just like breaking down those myths, breaking down those avenues. And it's been a life-changing, amazing experience. I don't feel like I'm out of depth on anything I'm doing at all. It's not easy. It requires effort, right? Like I said, but the things that are not easy are probably worth doing if you have to apply yourself. And the things that you work for, it makes it more valuable. If somebody just gave me a degree and said, hey man, like you're a business school graduate, I wouldn't appreciate it. I wouldn't honor it. I wouldn't care as much about it versus having to work for it.
Yeah.
Now there are some more challenges. When we get out of the military, we have a safer baseline for funding because business school is expensive, college is expensive. thankfully through our service, we have benefits that are rewarded for us to make that an easier decision. So that cost, the upfront cost or the opportunity cost that you have to like weigh versus go to business school versus not for a greater return, that investment, that sunk cost that comes into making those decisions is less impactful. So it makes a huge difference. I was talking with some of my classmates, and I was like, they were like, wow, we have to use all of our paid time off to go to school. I was like, holy crap, that blows my mind, right? Something I've never thought about, especially coming from the SOCOM environment where you get a mandatory 4-day every day, which also aligns with every residency. I was talking to somebody, broke it down. Somebody could go to Fuqua School of Business weekend program and use less than their annual leave every year and be able to go. You can put in 4-day passes.
Yeah.
Super easy, right? You can do that. You can do that time. It's weekends time, depending on your job requirements, obviously.
Yep.
But it's definitely possible. Which is crazy to think about, that everyone's like paying for it. Plus they're also using scholarships, grants, and their own funding to like student loans and so forth. And we thankfully have the GI Bill. We have veteran benefits. There's veteran transition programs that will help with that. And we're afforded that. I think it's well deserved, because anybody who can raise their right hand and have the potential to risk their life in defense of the greatest country in the universe, I think it's well justified. Even if I didn't benefit from it, I would still agree.
Yeah,
I would still agree. So we were afforded for that. So that makes that risk, by that diversification or the additional support, makes it easier to say yes to those things, which is why I encourage a lot of veterans to go through that process, because you can be successful without business school. I wholeheartedly believe it. It just overcomes barriers that you don't have to overcome when you graduate.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's a great transition pipeline and stuff, because we are capable of doing so much more. But if you don't want to achieve those things, don't go to business school just to go to business school.
Yeah.
Don't get it. I was talking with some veterans back in July, and we were talking about college education. And I don't like the idea of going to college just to go to college. It's not worth it. If you're not coming out of it with a skill or development or enough to overcome barriers to entry for employment, career, and purpose in life, then it's not worth the cost, because then you're not getting anything out of it. You're not reaping the rewards of the investment of your time and effort. Granted, everything's not going to be efficient, because you can't be 100% efficient at anything. You're going to take classes you like don't necessarily need and stuff like that. Like, that's going to happen, right? Because there's no one size fits all process for anything. Even two people doing the exact same things in life, like going through the exact same steps, going to Ranger Regiment, being squad leader, doing whatever, going into the SF world, being an 18 Bravos, right? Like 2 18 Bravos aren't going to have the same proficiency, because we're all individuals. So there's no one size fits all. But with that, like with those steps and everything else, it does make it easier to go say, well, Thomas Andrew Hutton's now certified to do these things. Just like going through the Q course, you're now certified with a base performance expectation to serve on an SF team. Going through Ranger School, going through RAT Ranger Assessment Selection Program, like you're now certified to do these baselines. It gets you in the door, whereas you wouldn't get in that door without those things.
Yeah.
And then after that, once you get there, those selection processes, overcoming those barriers to entry, the more tenured you are in your career, your organization, or wherever you are, the less meaningful they are. But you don't get that opportunity if you don't do those things.
Yeah.
And that's where I look at it. And that's kind of what I've understood, and coming from, like I said, with my drunken stumble and realizing things were possible, right? That's how I look at it for business school and when I talk to, and it's what I apply that method when I talk to people about business school, because I'm a huge advocate for it, right? To at least consider it. And a lot of people I've talked to are like, oh no, I don't want to do it. A lot of them are actually going in to start school next year. And it could have been a year ahead, with some support and stuff like that. And that's okay. That's not bad. And I'm not speaking poorly against them or anything else, because you have to do things when you're ready. Because if you do it when you're not ready, then you're not going to be able to put that effort that makes it worth doing.
And that's where problems come from. Oh, that makes sense.
Without a doubt.
Yeah.
And that's one of those things about, I've talked to some people, some officers enlisted who've like, man, I'm thinking about leaving this organization, or I'm thinking about getting out of the Army or whatever. And the thing that I kind of tell people when I express this is, do it when you think you're ready. You don't have to know, you just think, right? And if you're not 100% invested in what you're doing, then the change is probably needed, especially in the Army, because that's what when you're a leader, like that's what your subordinates in the Army deserve. It's 100% vested leadership, and to make them better and commit to the job, all of the ramifications of the job, obviously not sacrificing your future or your mental health or like your family, right? But that's what they deserve. And if you're not there, then it's definitely time to go to a place where you will be successful. The effort that you want to put in, you're getting reasonable valuation, reasonable support, and that you're supported appropriately. And that's why I try to say for people, because I've seen people stay in the military longer than what they should. And I've also seen people get out before they're ready and have problems with that. So like that's a long kind of standing thing of that led me through it. So and granted, I'm only in term 2, but I see the benefits of how I'm growing as a leader, understanding more, a lot of the support from a lot of the talks from people, a lot of the things that instruction from Brad and Kevin in the Catalyst that made a huge difference, where it's like, oh, I can understand these things. I'm talking to people that are VPs and CEOs, COOs, like phenomenally successful leaders in business and managers, right, in my program. And we talk about the differences of things, and they'll talk to me like, dude, like what you've done is so amazing. It's like, I can't believe you've done these things and done these hard things or whatever. And I look at them in the same light.
Yeah.
And it's because, but I have a lot of those things like made it more normal. So I understand more of what they're talking about. So that bridging that gap between military leadership and civilian leadership / management is a lot easier, because a lot of the stuff we went through in the Catalyst gave those foundations for that business acumen. And when I try to explain to people about the stuff in the military, it's just because you haven't normalized it. Once you normalize things, they're easier. Yeah. When you deal with the physical challenges that are coming to light, right? And it's like, how do you deal with that? Well, you normalize it. Once you normalize it, the impact's not as negative.
Yeah.
It's still positive, right? And you can normalize things. The positive response can still be amazing, still greater, and everything else, and fulfilling. But it definitely minimizes that negativity bias.
Well, I think that normalization that you're talking about, you're a trailblazer in this field. I think from the perspective of like, you've reached these levels in the military and then you got out, but you're seeing that connective tissue of how do I translate what I did in the military, and you're already moving down that path and falling into these conversations with successful business people and leaders in different industries. There's a mutual respect there, as opposed to, I think a lot of people might fall into this of looking up at someone, as opposed to having that shared respect level where you're able to communicate confidently and they're able to see that confident communication, because you connected the dots between the two. There's not a huge gap between everything. And I think this has been a very good conversation. And there's one final question I want to throw at you. Going through the Catalyst and where you're at now in the business school, what would you say has been the most important connection, going back to that language concept, bridging that gap? What do you think has been the most important connection from your experience as a leader in the military and Ranger Regiment to what you're looking at as a future leader in the business world that you're getting into? What do you think would be the most valuable one there?
I can hit that both. I'll hit the the Ranger Regiment first, and then I'll hit the Catalyst because they're parallel, and there's a little bit of overlap. The thing about the Ranger Regiment that I definitely got out of, and it's kind of I had it in the conventional Army, but it got strengthened in the Ranger Regiment, was intentionality. Being intentional with your decisions and with your leadership, being intentional invested in what you're doing. Because if you do that, you're kind of like doing that assessment, looking at different courses of action, like understanding that and choosing the best one for what your goals are. All right. In the Ranger Regiment, it's about the mission and the organization and developing others. Right. So like your goals are going to be different there, but if you're intentional to what you're trying to do in the long term for success, then it allows you to kind of trim away the fat. There's always going to be a critical path, and it's okay to deviate from the critical path to go do these things, as long as you still come back to your critical path, right? Like when I was applying for business school, I had a lot of opportunities to go do all these things, and it was like, well, I can go do this, but then I'm going to miss this deadline for this, what I'm looking for my end goal for me. And if I can do all these extra things and still get value out of it, but if I miss this intentional step, then it's not worth doing because I'm being intentional to my path with that. With the Catalyst, what it was I didn't realize the depth that I was learning in the cohort, because you don't know what you don't know. But through all the instruction, a lot of things, and the leadership I kind of knew a lot more about, but what I didn't realize and I understood, like the concept of intentionality and thinking of consequences and stuff, of understanding the why and stuff, but going with Kevin, Brad, John, and everybody else, like learning all from the instructors, was I learned a lot of the verbiage and a lot of the normalized, a lot of things I didn't know were things. So when I'm going through business school, I'm like, oh, I've learned this. I didn't realize I learned this. I knew it was like drinking from a fire hose, obviously in the cohort, but it built that foundation to be higher. So as I'm going through the program, I'm like, oh, I know enough to conceptually understand these processes, this stuff that I didn't know or have a frame of reference. I know it more because I didn't realize how much I actually learned in the cohort. And it's like doing that periodization. It's a challenging program, but the things that are worth doing aren't easy. And we had to like drink from a fire hose and like absorb a lot of information. And you don't realize how much you actually learn until you're exposed to it again later on. So I think my learning curve so far in business school, like I said, I'm only in term 2, hasn't been as steep as it could have been. And that's definitely because of the Catalyst.
Well, that's great. That's kind of what it sounded like listening to your whole spectrum that you've gone through, and I'm glad you laid that out because that's perfect. But I think we're reaching the end of our time. But did you have any closing comments you want to throw out?
Yeah. I mean, I recommend the Catalyst program for anybody who wants to shorten that learning curve or make it less steep going into business, as like trying to go into the boardroom or go into business schools so they can eventually be in the boardroom. I think that's because like you can't be good at everything, but I think that's one thing that the Catalyst program brings that's hard to find elsewhere. And I do like that approach for that buy-in that's required for everybody in the cohort, because it makes everyone more invested because they're personally invested in it. If you're personally invested in it, not just, oh, I just have to show up because I'm a veteran, or I just have to show up because of this and that, it makes that smaller cohort work harder and work better for each other and come out of it. I don't think that's something for everybody to do, right? And not say anything against another transition program because everyone's good at certain things. And that's okay, because you can't have a one size fits all. And that's what the problem with the transition program for the Army is it's a bare minimal for everything. But when you look at it, the minimal for success for everybody might not be the threshold that you need, because everybody's different. So I really appreciate about the Catalyst program.
Awesome. Well, thank you very much, Andrew. This has been a enlightening and fun conversation. So I really appreciate it.
I appreciate it. Thank you for having me.
Yeah, thank you for being here. Well, thanks everybody, and we'll see you at the next episode. But if you're interested in going through the Catalyst program, I'll put information in the description below, and see you next time. Thank you.